nothing happens. Now we dig the ragdoll a little bit into the ground. Pops up, good little bit. We're on 1/5 gravity. I had a really hard time reproducing the drastic flying that happens in Onward, but on 1/5 gravity, and if we bury him about like this, he'll just about, not quite his own height, but I think we can do a little bit better than that if we fully bury the legs. Still just about to standing height. I did find that when I tried this with just cubes, they don't fly at all, so it seems to be something to do with the way that Unity is resolving the joints that really amplifies this sort of momentum that gets picked up. And I'm sure that the character rigging is a little bit more complex than what I just threw together. But at any rate, so we'll go with something about like this. You can see not quite to standing height, but you know, he is pretty consistently flying up in the air. So I wrote a short little script, called it Not to the Moon. What it essentially does is it waits until after a physics update and then zeroes out the velocity on all the rigid bodies that are a child of this fake ragdoll object. So if I activate that script, and it will zero a certain number of consecutive fixed updates. So by default, it's only going to zero it once. So sometimes the physics solution is so bad that it doesn't actually resolve all these issues in a single frame. So it might be necessary to do multiple updates, but we'll start with just one. And you can see that already it's not flying anywhere near as high as without it. So again, if I disable it and play, you can see he goes pretty high. And if I enable it, he barely goes up at all. And if I just increase this to say 3 for this particular circumstance, he barely pops up at all. And the cool thing about the way that this works is, so for example, if we were in a situation where someone was, say, sideways on a hill, instead of sort of being catapulted out, he would just sort of start sliding down. Well, in this case, the friction's a little bit too high. But, if we disable the zeroing, you'll probably see him, well, not quite go flying, but he's certainly gone crazy in a way that shooting him shouldn't have made happen. So to show the code, really, really simple. So what I'm doing in the start function, I'm just grabbing all the rigid bodies and just saving them in a list just so that I don't have to grab them every single time we do it. We have a config setting for the number of times to zero, and we privately keep track of the number of times we have zeroed. And then on the update frame, we're starting a coroutine that I've written down here. And that coroutine yields for wait for fixed update. Then after it receives that wait for fixed update, it will just double check that the time zeroed is passed, because what actually happens is this update starts queuing up a whole bunch of these. So just to make sure that it's only zeroing the requisite number of times, we're double checking in the callback. And it just goes through each rigid body, sets the velocity and angular velocity to 0. There's probably some smarter things that you could do here, like, I don't know, lerping it between 0 and what it got, so that you might get some motion, just not quite so much. One other thing that I wanted to show, actually, let's untilt this platform. Let's pick up the fake ragdoll and do a quick comparison of just a normal ragdoll fall. Let's just rotate him 90 degrees upright. So if we disable the script, drop him, obviously this is a really bad ragdoll. I threw it together with default settings of joints, but you see he kind of just doubles over forwards and falls. So I just want to demonstrate that 3 frames worth of zeroing doesn't meaningfully affect sort of what you see from that. There's maybe a short delay at the start when he sort of just very slightly floats down a tiny bit, but for the most part, this doesn't visibly meaningfully change things to be much worse in the average case, and it obviously cuts down on some of those worst case scenarios. Um, Again, I had a really difficult time reproducing exactly what you see in Onward, but I think this approach is something that could absolutely address what we see in Onward. I think it really is something sort of simple like that. But yeah, hope it helps.